Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. If you ever spend time doing research on the various planets of the Star Wars galaxy, you might come across an interesting phenomenon. The population of many of the most famous Star Wars planets seem remarkably small, especially when you compare it to Earth's own population of over 8 billion people. With a diameter of around 12,756 kilometers, our blue little disk of a planet, Earth, is roughly the same size of many of the most famous planets in the galaxy. I think this is probably done purposely. Today we'll be taking a look at a bunch of different planets and talk about why the population numbers are so dynamic in the Star Wars galaxy and why there really doesn't seem to be any rule or pattern in how life spreads across the galaxy. So I've always viewed Alderaan as almost a utopian version of Earth, that one day we somehow settle all of our racial, religious, and cultural differences, and we use droids and technology to make our lives easier so people don't have to toil away every day just to survive. And if we finally manage to defeat the other sentient species we share this planet with, well, we're basically Alderaan at that point. A place where food, water, and shelter seem not only plentiful, but basically not something people worry about anymore. As a matter of fact, everyone seems to be thriving on this planet. A testament to the rulers of Alderaan who have done well in their stewardship of the world, maintaining Alderaan's peaceful, idyllic landscapes and natural beauty while still boasting a robust and advanced economy. Summer break is almost here. It's time to get your gaming back on. For me, there's nothing better than having a deep, well-designed game on my mobile phone that I can flip to whenever I want. And right now, the game I can't get enough of is Raid Shadow Legends, the premier team-building RPG game out for mobile and PC platforms. They're also our sponsor for today's video. Raid Shadow Legends is all about understanding your heroes. Build your party to suit your playstyle as you upgrade and loot your way to the ultimate squad. Rotate and test your tanks, healers, DPS, and crowd control style warriors until you have a combination that really works. For instance, take the Barbarian faction. They have heroes that are primarily focused on brute strength and power. Their heroes provide some of the best damage stats in the game. They also are quite flexible as a faction, and many of their characters can also be used in the support role as well. I started out playing Raid by choosing characters that I liked aesthetically, or just based on personal preferences of what character classes I usually use in games like this. But the speed of the gameplay and the sheer amount of options for upgrading, along with a challenge, allowed me to test new character classes and warrior builds all the time, and I have to say, this really got me hooked. Raid has provided me with a lot of freebies to give you guys, so check out the description down below and click on that link. You'll get a huge starter pack with an ultimate Galek hero from the Orcs faction. You'll also get another starter pack after reaching level 15 that includes an epic Zargala hero from the Orcs as well. Finally, use my promo code Desert Queen to get the legendary champion Tuhunarak, a powerful support champion that works well with almost any squad. Thank you for your patience, guys. I hope you check out Raid. On to the rest of our video. I'd like to think that, one day in the good timeline of Earth, where we don't use AI to kill each other, AI actually brings a lot of great things to our planet. We actually successfully, peacefully adapt to AI. That's the good version of the timeline that I don't know, still possible, I guess. And in that future, AI workforces can remove humans from mundane, difficult, and tiring work, and we as humans can also focus on more meaningful professions or just improving ourselves. Imagine if voters actually understood the situation in the country and really applied themselves when it came to learning about government policy and the positions of all these various candidates. We should have debates everywhere about political and economic reform because our country clearly needs it. But instead, we're having these embarrassingly stupid conversations about cultural issues that I thought wasn't even the government's responsibility in the first place. What is going on? Or what if parents could focus more on raising their children rather than working meaningless 9-to-5 jobs? That would make our future generation probably better prepared for life, more resilient. And this is what Alderaan represents, utopia, or at least as close to utopia as you can get without killing everyone. And it's one of the founding planets of the Galactic Republic and considered one of the planets that really got it right throughout history. After disastrous periods of war and devastation during the Old Republic due to Jedi and Sith conflicts, Alderaan emphasized the development of human capital and nurturing a culture of knowledge and open-mindedness and appreciation of the arts. You would think that such a planet would have a much larger population than Earth thanks to its stability and wealth, but perhaps therein lies the truth about Alderaan. Even though Alderaanians are known for their kindness, right, they accept a lot of refugees and migrants on their planet from war-torn planets, there's still a substantial amount of Alderaanians who kind of had this not in my backyard mentality when it came to galactic politics. Because there's nothing really great or wonderful about living on an overpopulated planet. You still have to control your borders to a certain extent. Now, so Alderaan's population is probably going to be pretty stable. You're probably not going to have extremely high birth rates, as you see in most advanced planets or countries. And at the same time, you're not going to see any decrease because there's not that much instability. But how Alderaan grows is really through expansion and migration off of the planet. If you take a look at Alderaan's role in the galaxy, I always call it the heart of the galaxy, because culturally speaking, Alderaanian culture is probably the most widely dispersed. For instance, a lot of planets have Alderaanian-inspired designs and architecture. Take a look at Lothal's capital city or Bespin's Cloud City. The footprints of Alderaanian design can be seen in almost every sector of the galaxy through either cuisine or music, literature. And so when Alderaan was destroyed in that mining accident, the Alderaanian people had already kind of spread out amongst the stars with their culture. And so, to a certain extent, the Alderaanians were impossible to kill. Now, Corellia is slightly smaller than Earth at around 11,000 kilometers, and despite the fact that it kind of looks like that area in between Newark Airport and Manhattan, when you drive into the city, Corellia is actually nowhere near as populated as New Jersey is. It only has a population of 3 billion. Although I remember earlier this year, or was it last year, I was doing research, and I saw that Corellia's population number was even lower. It was like in the millions. That might have been a mistake, or it might have been just a certain period of time. You see, a lot happened to Corellia over the years as it began to expand as a planet. Corellia, at least initially, shared a lot of similarities with Alderaan. It was also in the core regions of the galaxy. It was one of the founding planets in the Republic, although it also kept a bit of independence from the Republic. Corellia sent explorers and colonists to the peripherals of the galaxy early on, just like Alderaan as well, and one could argue that Corellians were even more adventurous than their Alderaanian cousins. But what the Corellians failed to do while they were exploring the stars was preserve their home. They let their ecosystem go completely to shit. Driven by greed and short-term profits, industrialization destroyed Corellia's environment, and Corellia became one of the premier shipbuilding planets for the early Republic. This took a huge toll on the local environment, and by the time the Empire was in power, most of the planet's surface was polluted and destroyed. Population flight from Corellia became a huge issue. If you had any money at all, you were trying to get off of Corellia and find work, life, air that was just cleaner and better in other areas. Now here on Earth, we don't really have population flight because obviously we don't have the technology to do it. I mean, occasionally one of us manages to accidentally fall off of the ice wall guarding the edges of our disk world. But it's not like large groups of people are actually venturing off planet and changing the population on Earth. And so Earth's population is pretty much self-contained, and there's only really internal migration and internal factors that change that population. Whereas by the time Han Solo is born, most of the people who have the means to leave Corellia already are gone. And so while Alderaan's population is probably pretty stable, Corellia's is declining. This is a dying world. Now, the third planet I want to talk about is Naboo, found in the mid-rim and has a population of around 1 billion humans. There's also a sizable indigenous Gungan population that was discovered after the blockade of Naboo. It's estimated that there are close to 3 billion Gungans living beneath the planet's oceans, bringing the planet's population to more than 4 billion. If you take a look at the galactic map, you'll see that it is, segmented into rings, and the further out you get, the more sparsely populated, the later these areas were settled. And in many ways, these rings kind of tell the history of the Republic, just like how, rings inside of a tree trunk tell the history of that tree. You have the core in the middle of everything. That is where the Republic started. Outside the core is the colonies, which is actually not newly settled space anymore by the time of the Galactic Civil War, but a very populated and industrialized area of the galaxy. Beyond that, we have the Inner Rim, which really is the beginning of the transition from the core to the peripherals. Outside of that, we have the Expansion region, which actually is not on the edges of the Republic, but sandwiched in by the Mid-Rim, which is not in the middle, but on the outside, and the closest area to the Outer Rim, which is actually on the outside. Population numbers do tend to fluctuate from one place to another, but typically speaking, the further out you get from the core, the less the population is. And most population centers, especially in the outer rim, can be found near hyperspace hubs and transport points. Each ring represents a wave of migration and exploration. Naboo falls into one of the later stages of galactic history expansion. The planet was discovered around only 4000 BBY by the Grismalti people, and what started out as a private hunting preserve eventually became a permanent human settlement. 1 billion population in just like 4,000 years of growth is really not that shabby. Here on Earth, it took us until 1804 for our planet to hit 1 billion humans. And most estimates establish that humanity has been around for at least 10,000 years, potentially much longer than that. So we've seen multiple planets that are all the same size as Earth, but all of these planets have a much lower population than Earth's. Chandrila, the home planet of Mon Mothma, is also Earth-like in its size, but it only has a population of 1.2 billion people on it. So we've established that one of the main reasons why population numbers fluctuate so much in Star Wars is because you do have the ability to leave your planet and go visit other places and choose other places to live, just like how you can leave a country here on Earth. And that is how we tend to view migration, especially here in the US. We think about it from country to country, but there are actually many different types of migration patterns, even in our own world. For instance, take a look at a country like China. In previous videos, we talked about China's historically isolationist tendencies that cause a lot of problems for it. But one of the main reasons why China in its antiquity was so isolationist was because it was such a massive population. There's so much going on inside of the country, there's never really any need to look outside. It's an arrogant view, but it's honestly a view that's also shared by Americans, right? In a lot of ways. Like, we're also a massive country. We have plenty of resources. We really don't need to depend on other countries, or at least that's what some people in this country think. So why does China have such a huge population? Well, this is actually caused by a few different phenomena. While the Europeans had their wars and violence in the last few hundred years, China more or less exited its warring period thousands of years ago and consolidated in its current form. Sure, there were rebellions, dynasties falling, but unification happened a long time ago for the Chinese. And the Chinese Communist Party, in all honesty, is just the most modern iteration in the Chinese dynastic system. It has a lot of similarities to previous dynasties. Two, if you take a look at China, it's the only country in the world that has two major rivers running in it from east to west. If you take a look at all the other great rivers in the world, from the Amazon to the Rhine to the Ganges, the Mississippi and Colorado, they all run north and south. China's Yangtze and Yellow River both run east to west, and that is kind of rare. And since China is a pretty wide country from a geological standpoint, and because agrarian societies grow up near rivers, this east to west flow of the river accommodates huge amounts of population, much more than if they were flowing north to south. There's also a theory that agrarian societies that farm rice are more collaborative. This is because when you grow rice, you actually have to flood the fields with massive amounts of water. You see, rice can survive being submerged in water, but what doesn't survive? That's weeds and a lot of different types of pests that might hurt rice. So flooding your fields actually preserves the rice and increases yields. Now, before you flood the field, you actually have to plant your rice first in soil, let it, wait a few weeks so that it can actually hold itself while it's underwater. And because most rice farmers share water sources with other farmers and have fields that are connected together, if one farmer prematurely floods their fields, it can destroy everyone else's crops. Therefore, rice farmers have to always work together in order to make sure that everyone is ready to plant. This organization happened out of necessity, and I think because all of these farmers were just having these conversations every year and just forced to somehow figure out ways to compromise and deal with each other, you have a much more harmonious society, or at least in some ways it's more harmonious. In China, there's actually this, joke about people in the South always getting along with each other very well and, working hard and growing all of the food for the nation and not having any ambition to rule, whereas the Northerners, who aren't collective rice farmers, are far more aggressive culturally and always attempting to rule the rest of China with their annoying accents and their large faces. Anyway, before I get off topic anymore, so China has this massive population, 1.4 billion, and it is declining. But because China is so large, in many ways, it's almost like a planet in itself. You have massive amounts of internal migration that basically are amongst the busiest in the world. And so in China, you have these tier 1 cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen, which are essentially like developed countries. Here, people make very high salaries. They have access to everything that you or I would. A lot of people here usually have VPNs to get around the Great Firewall because of work or just because of curiosity. A lot of people in these tier 1 cities tend to speak English, and they like to consume kind of popular culture that's not just Chinese, but maybe from Japan, from Korea, and even from Europe and the United States. Then you also have tier 2 cities, which are still pretty wealthy and have a lot of services and really good to live in from a global standard. But this tier system goes all the way down to tier 5. And you also have rural areas where people are living in pretty impoverished conditions. China has eliminated extreme poverty, which is like under $1 a day, but a good percentage of the country, I think it's like 400 million, more than the United States, still live below around $5 a day, which is still very impoverished, and it's difficult to live like this. So China is desperately trying to lift up these people from these 5th and 4th tier cities, basically by bringing them to the higher tier cities. But this isn't really like moving internally in the country like in the United States. This move is more of a cultural shock than anything else. When you go from tier 5 to tier 1, you could be going from no running water and electricity to Western-style toilets, and some of the most futuristic-looking cities in the world. In America, inequality is characterized by how much power and freedom the super rich have. In China, inequality is still characterized by those millions still in poverty. And again, I don't mean US-style poverty, I mean under $5 a day. I mean, it's just $165 a month as far as your salary goes. It's not even livable in China, where cost for food is very cheap. Now, up until recently, Chinese people had something known as a hukou. Basically, you are registered to work and live in one city. You actually can't go to another city and work without a hukou for that specific city. This might seem like an alien concept for Americans, but it's actually quite common in some European countries, but mostly in Asian countries where the population is pretty large and control of population movement is pretty important for the government so that resources can be properly distributed to areas of the country. And so cities like Shanghai used to have millions of undocumented Chinese workers living there illegally without access to school, healthcare, and everything else. The hukou was eliminated just a few years ago in an attempt to increase kind of legal migration, so it's easier for these migrant workers to actually start a family or buy housing. The end result is that while tons of people are moving to tier 1s and tier 2s, China's economic prospects are dimming as their manufacturing sector slows down because of an aging workforce and also increasing wages, along with honestly not enough markets for them to export to. And so China's rush to get rich and lift all these people out of poverty, it might not happen before they get old. And if they do get old, well, it's going to be pretty bad. There's also the other effect of this migration trend where tier 4 and tier 5 cities, rural areas are becoming abandoned. There are already tons of half-complete real estate projects all over the country, even in tier 1 and tier 2 cities. You see tons of these things. It's crazy. And now there's also an increasing danger of rural areas becoming completely depopulated. From 2000 to 2020, the rural population in China decreased by 300 million, or 1 United States. No biggie. Now, in the Star Wars galaxy, there also are tier 1 cities or tier 1 planets, right? Places where everyone wants to go to. You have tier 1 planets like Alderaan, which are, pretty exclusive and probably have limited space. You also have worlds that specialize in ship design, like Kuwait. That might be a good place to go if you're interested in industry. But really, there's only one universally recognized tier 1 planet, and that is Coruscant. Coruscant is where the Republic's central government is seated. It's also where the economic center of the galaxy is. All the trade routes eventually lead to Coruscant. The population of this planet is not just in the billions, it's estimated to be in the trillions. We've actually done some of our own speculation, and I think it's actually in the tens of trillions. You see, Coruscant isn't just a planet-wide city, it's a planet-wide city that runs miles deep, with thousands of levels. And in truth, in the lower levels, the authorities have lost count and also lost control. Coruscant remains a beacon of hope for people all across the galaxy, escaping poverty, war, boredom. It's a place artists go to get their works seen. It's where businessmen try out their schemes and raise funds. Every moisture farmer and scavenger from Tatooine to Jakku dreams of seeing the city planet at least once in their lives. And therefore, this planet is a constant drain to all the other planets in the galaxy. Because when things aren't going well on Naboo, Alderaan, and Corellia, you can always go to Coruscant. Population migration from rural and less populated areas to urban places have long created these problems. If you go to Japan, because of their shrinking population, outside of the major cities, most real estate doesn't grow in value. And actually, most real estate loses value over time. And that's why in recent times you have this weird trend of foreigners going to Japan and buying these beautiful classic wooden Japanese homes for tens of thousands of dollars. A similar phenomenon happened in Italy, where local municipalities were also experiencing depopulation. Basically, they were selling the homes of deceased residents with no heir for extremely low prices, under the condition that new buyers would renovate their house and live there. And so, as you can see, no planet in Star Wars is going to be able to follow the growth pattern of Earth. And that's because in a galaxy where you have all these planets, you have FTL travel connecting all of these planets together, the migration patterns are going to be unbelievably complex. And there are going to be a lot of factors that are going to shift people from one place to another. And that's because, for sentient beings, for not just humans, but for any species, it's always been the organisms that have been able to lift themselves up and move away from danger or move towards, better prospects. It's those organisms, the ones who immigrate, that ultimately help the species survive. And so I guess it's really important that in the Star Wars galaxy we understand the progress and the progression of immigration patterns from the inside to the outside, because most of the political problems are actually caused by the rejection of the outer and peripheral planets by the core. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.